Dr. Natalie Vogeikof-Brogan, the head archivist of the American School for Classical Studies, to speak to us on Professor Setrescu, American classicist in the Aegean at the end of the Great War.
Αξιότιμοι καλεσμένοι, είναι οι φίλοι των Anzac, κυρίες και κύριοι. Εγώ θα φύγω από την μάχη της Καλύπολης, θα πάω στο τέλος του Πρώτου Παγκοσμίου Πολέμου και στην ευρύτερη περιοχή του Αιγαίου, του Ανατολικού Αιγαίου. Και θα αρχίσω με ένα τηλεγράφημα. Islands and coast Asia Minor still crowded with refugees. Stop. Number there still to be repatriated, estimated 300,000. Stop. We are maintaining 3 stations in Mytilene district, clothing alone being available, but food urgently needed. Stop. Above statements based on personal inspection is commissioned. Stop. We recommend that work in Aegean be immediately extended to other islands like Chios, Samos, and to opposite coast, which can be reached by sea transport, which can be secured by Greek governments. Stop. I have just read a small portion of a long telegram, 47 lines, that Colonel Edward Capps said to Harvey Gibson, member of the American Red Cross War Council in Paris on December 12, 1918. The telegram reported the activities of the American Red Cross since arrival of its Greek commission in Athens on October 23rd. Tonight I will describe the relief efforts of the American Red Cross on the islands of the Eastern Aegean at the end of the Great War, and in so doing, I will also review the work of the Greek Commission within the broader mission and goals of the American Red Cross during the Wilson era. I have an additional interest in the story. The Greek Commission was headed by Edward Capps, chairman of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens for 20 years from 1918 to 1939. The mission to Greece was organized in June and July of 1918 in response to an appeal from the Greek Red Cross. From the time that America entered the war in 1917, the American Red Cross, with the endorsement of President Wilson's government, had sent several commissions to Europe to provide military and civilian relief in England, France, Italy, Belgium, and Serbia. There came from America to do the work 103 persons, 60 men and 43 women, and several others were recruited in Europe. They enlisted in the service of the American Red Cross from all parts of the United States and represented all manners of occupations and professions. There were businessmen, lawyers, bankers, physicians, preachers, teachers, farmers, and mechanics, and among the women, trained nurses, stenographers, and social workers. The authority of the commission was vested in the commissioner, who held the rank of lieutenant colonel, and 7 deputy commissioners with the rank of major. The commissioner was no other than Edward Capps, ο τρίτος από αριστερά, professor of classics at Princeton University. Henry Dewing, also professor of classics at Princeton, most likely Capps's personal choice, was appointed secretary of the commission. Henry Dewing is the last man with a mustache at the top of the photo. It is not clear when and how it was decided that Edward Capps would lead the American Red Cross Greek Commission. The fact that he had been a colleague of Woodrow Wilson at Princeton University must have played some role, but it was not the only reason. The American Red Cross had created a separate department, the Insular and Foreign Division, to reach out to the thousands of Americans who resided abroad, either as employees of the State Department or working for various American corporations, institutions, and organizations. One of these institutions was the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. Founded in 1881 by a small group of American professors and enlightened individuals, the American school facilitated the work of students and scholars who traveled to Greece to study the country's classical civilization and conduct archaeological research. In 1918, a few months before the Greek Red Cross appealed for help to the American Red Cross, Katz was appointed chairman of the managing committee of the American school. That Katz had access to an operating base in Greece must have given him a leg up in the selection process. In addition, the staff of the school in Athens, Bert Hochschild, director since 1906, and Karl Bleget, secretary since 1912, shared a deep knowledge of Greece, its geography, language, customs, and above all, they were well connected. An essential depository of local experience, the school could and would act as a buffer to a group of newcomers ignorant of Greek realities. The Greek Commission, in addition to Katz's doing, also included 7 deputy commissioners. Clifford Barnes, a minister from Chicago, Carl Black, a surgeon from Jacksonville, Illinois, Cyril Hopkins, a professor of agronomy from Urbana, Illinois, Alfred James, a businessman from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Horace Oakley, a Chicago lawyer, Samuel Walker, a physician from Chicago, and A. Windsor Weld, a businessman from Boston. We do not know the selection criteria for the deputy commissioners and how much say Katz had in the selection process. But the majority of them had some connection with the state of Illinois. Katz's home state makes me suspect that he was involved in the selection of the deputy commissioners and probably already knew some of them personally. Katz had been born in Jacksonville, Illinois in 1866, received his BA from Illinois College, his PhD from Yale, and had taught at the University of Chicago before he moved on to Princeton. With the exception of Secretary Henry Dewing, who was in his mid-30s, the rest of the officers were mature men in the early 50s with families and established careers. Its commission must have had representatives from a number of professions. Naturally, doctors and nurses, but also ministers, bankers, and lawyers were highly desirable members of, as this telegram to Horace Oakley reads, this commission should include lawyer and you have been suggested as eminently fitted for this position. In the case of Oakley, his background in classics was also emphasized in the recommendation letter sent to the American Red Cross headquarters in Washington. At the university, he was considered one of the best scholars in Greek. He has devoted considerable study to international law, and he is of broad cultivation and with particular interest in the ancient and medieval Mediterranean civilization, wrote his referees. While for the younger people, personal development and career opportunities might have been an additional motivation for joining the different missions of the American Red Cross in Europe, it is not entirely clear why older and established people would leave their homes to subject themselves to hardships and suffering. There are several reasons to consider. First of all, a strong sense of patriotic duty must have influenced their decisions. Although service in the American Red Cross was not a substitute for combat, the militarization of the American Red Cross after 1917 was viewed as an alternative form of service by many men who were beyond draft age. Businessmen, doctors, and professors, including Edward Cass, became majors and lieutenant colonels overnight. One also has to acknowledge the cosmopolitan nature of American society during the Progressive Era, a perspective that encouraged international activities. But most of all, by being part of the American Red Cross in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, one belonged to a new professional elite, drawn from the ranks of the US government and corporate America. These men and women were similarly minded and well-educated people who had embraced the scientific management theory for economic efficiency and labor productivity. This new elite, which was proud to manage philanthropic foundations and organizations as the American Red Cross, also shared President Wilson's larger vision for global peace and international order. In addition to substituting dollars for bullets, America had found another way to reach out to the world by offering a new type of civilian aid, non-sectarian, preventive, and constructive. By trusting its humanitarian mission to an army of professionals, the American Red Cross conferred a greater sense of cultural prestige in the international work of the organization. With this as a background, I now come to the main part of my talk, that is, the work of the American Red Cross in the Aegean. The members of the Greek Commission arrived in Greece via Paris on October 23, 1918. Upon their arrival in Athens, Commissioner Capps and his deputies were taken to the American School of Classical Studies, which had been rented by the American Red Cross to be used by the deputy commissioners as sleeping quarters. The rest of the commission boarded in Athenian hotels. For its headquarters, the commission rented a large private mansion, Prince Insulandis House on Kifisia Street, the part that now is Vasilissis Sophias. By December, the Commission had already dispatched 3 missions. One to Eastern Macedonia to facilitate the repatriation of more than 100,000 Greeks who had been taken hostages to Bulgaria during the war. A second to southern Epirus to investigate reports for extreme starvation. And a third to Mytilene and the adjoining islands to offer civilian relief to Greek refugees from Asia Minor. I have consulted 3 types of sources for the mission to the islands: American Red Cross's published reports, professional correspondence and unpublished reports in the National Archives and Record Administration in Washington, and personal papers of members of the Greek Commission housed in various US libraries and archives. In one case, I was fortunate to locate and buy from an antiquarian bookseller a rare privately circulated volume reproducing letters that Windsor Weld, one of the deputy commissioners, sent to his family from Greece in 1918-1919. Weld, an investment broker from Boston, was placed in charge of civilian relief in the Aegean and is the author of a long report about the activities of his mission. On November 6, 1918, Weld dispatched to Mytilene an expedition accompanied by a shipload of supplies to provide civilian relief to thousands of refugees from Asia Minor. Henry Dewing, the secretary of the commission, headed the mission. Dewing, a professor of classics, was no stranger in the Aegean. From 1910 until 1916, had served as dean of Robert College in Istanbul. Capps must have included Dewing in his party for his familiarity with the region and the language. The problem of language communication is not mentioned in the official reports, but appears frequently in Wells' letters to his family. Once outside Athens, the members of the commission could hardly find any Greek who could speak more than a few words of French. Dewing would do most of the talking when members of the commission conducted business with Greek officials on the islands. Using Mytilene as a base, relief was also distributed to the islands of Tenedos, Imbros, and Samothrace, as well as to the city of Aivali on Asia Minor. 2 more stations were established at Chios and Samos. Each station maintained a residence for personnel, a warehouse for supplies, and suitable quarters for its various activities. In the official and unofficial reports, it is repeatedly mentioned that transportation of supplies and people from Piraeus to the islands, but also from one island to the other, was exceedingly difficult. To facilitate island communication, in January 1919, the US Navy placed at the disposal of the Greek Commission 6 submarine chasers. The Commission found the refugees underfed and clad in rags. Very few children have shoes and stockings, well described in his report. The soup kitchens that the Greek state ran in Mytilene allowed for 1 dish of soup or vegetable each day, and such kitchens did not exist outside the town. In addition, a large epidemic of influenza had stripped the hospitals of medicines. The refugees lived like squatters in abandoned and half-destroyed Turkish houses in deplorable sanitary conditions. In the towns, because of lack of space, families of 8 to 10 people were forced to live in one room. On the island of Mytilene alone, the Greek Commission reported a refugee population of 52,000 quartered on a native population of 180,000. According to Dewing, the island at one time contained 120,000 refugees, but most of the men had been drafted by the Greek army or had gone to Thessaloniki to find work. The ones left behind were old or unfit men, women, many of them widows, and children. Typhus and tuberculosis were endemic. How wretched the situation was on the islands is best described by Weld, who, while attending a funeral, was shocked to see that, quote, the beautiful burying clothes and everything is taken off before the body is covered, clothing too valuable to lose. The American Red Cross organized its civilian relief on these islands along 3 lines. It opened workshops for making clothes. It distributed food and clothes, and medicines were dispensed by trained nurses. Since the Greek authorities had established refugee bureaus, the distribution of relief was done in an organized and fair manner. Opening workshops to make clothes was an intelligent way to occupy women refugees, teach them a skill. By earning some income to support their families, these women avoided prostitution. On the island of Samos, the workshop occupied 65 women who worked from 8:30 to 5:30 and produced daily from 200 to 300 garments. Paid work was part of the American Red Cross's overall philosophy, which did not focus only on temporary relief, but strongly emphasized creating foundations for orderly, industrious, post-war societies where people remained productive and self-supporting and children were well-fed and educated. The clothing was distributed in small parcels. Getting these parcels to the population that lived outside the large towns on the islands was a real trial for the members of the Commission. Traveling by donkeys and mules, sometimes it would take a full day to reach an isolated village. But when the American Red Cross workers arrived with supplies, and the American flag flying, there was always an American flag as a rule, the locals welcomed them with bells ringing and whistles blowing, for in the case of Mytilene, the olive oil factories were all running at this season, and almost every town had at least one factory. The American Red Cross had a tradition of distributing farm equipment and seeds to encourage agricultural work. In fact, when the Greek Commission was being formed, the Greek government asked if we should include in our mission an expert in soil fertility, Capps wrote in his report. It is no surprise, therefore, that one of the 7 deputy commissioners, Cyril Hopkins, was a professor of agronomy who came to Greece to study the soil and suggest ways of improving its efficiency. His report was the only one of the Greek Commission's reports that was published in Greek. Πώς η Ελλάς μπορεί να παράγει περισσότερη τροφή. Aiming at better nourishment for the starving refugees, the Commission added rations of beans twice a week. As a complement to the rice that the Greek government had sent, the American Red Cross added milk and sugar, transforming it into a nutritious risotto. Finally, the American Red Cross supplied the kitchens with flour in order to add macaroni to the sparse menu. The Commission also made sure that supplies of food and clothing were distributed to the orphanages. Weld makes another important point in this report. The distribution of the supplies was done directly by members of the Commission, in order that our help should not be merely of the physical kind, but should also bring into it something of a personal element, and thereby help to cement a friendly feeling and to show that the American people were directly interested in their lives and comfort. Chester Aldrich, an American architect and head of the Italian Commission, had blatantly reminded his delegates that all relief needed to possess, quote, an American character pronounced enough to constantly remind everyone connected with it that this help comes from America, end of quote. By creating an environment of lasting appreciation to the United States, knowingly or unknowingly, the American Red Cross workers of the Greek Commission and the other commissions were spreading the seeds for Wilson's peacetime visions of a safe and well-ordered world, evoking his famous 14-point speech of January 1918. Dewing in his report exalted the friendly reception of his team by the inhabitants of Mytilene. The streets resounded during the progress through the city with cheers for the American people and for President Wilson. The name and fame of Wilson is familiar in every household on the island of Mytilene, as indeed is through the length and breadth of Greece. But now you have been probably asking yourselves why the island of Lemnos is absent from this presentation. Although it appears on the map of the Aegean report and is one of the maybe I should go back here. Although it appears on the map of the Aegean report and in one of the distribution tables, it is almost certain that the Greek Commission did not set foot on Lemnos. Weld reports that the governor of Lemnos discouraged the American Red Cross from coming because there was much greater need to provide relief to the neighboring islands of Samothrace, Imbros, and Tenedos. Indeed, by the time that the American Red Cross reached Tenedos, the local inhabitants were near starvation since the last stock of flour had been exhausted weeks before. Nowhere have I seen refugees more grateful for the help given, reported one of the American Red Cross officers. While the European Red Cross societies limited their aid to the battlefield, the American Red Cross from the beginning embraced a broader mission by investing heavily in preventive long-term care. As soon as America entered the war in 1917, the American Red Cross, with the financial support from the Rockefeller Foundation, undertook a large anti-tuberculosis campaign in France to fight the resurgence of tuberculosis during the Great War. The French campaign initiated a series of other public health initiatives, which included educating women in the principles of public health and nursing. Specialists would offer courses in child welfare, hygiene, and sanitation. The Greek Commission included two experienced doctors from Chicago, Surgeon Carl Black and physician Samuel Walker. After surveying 47 military and 49 civilian hospitals, Black produced a report about their needs, and accordingly, the American Red Cross distributed aid. In the papers of the Deputy Commissioner Horace Oakley, I found a snapshot taken at the American Red Cross dispensary on the island of Chios. The head nurse is demonstrating to expectant mothers how to bathe and clothe babies properly. At the end of each of these demonstrations, the featured mothers would receive a package containing a blanket, soap, and clothes for the infant. Weld reported in one of his letters that the layettes, these parcels, were so eagerly sought after by the refugees that it led to attempts to obtain them by false pretenses through the use of padding to give the necessary appearance. Infant mortality in Greece was reported to be as high as 25% among children under the age of 2. By establishing several infant welfare stations and by training Greek nurses, the American Red Cross ensured the longevity of the program after its departure from Greece. The aftermath. With the repatriation of the Greeks from Bulgaria and the return of the refugees to Asia Minor, the Greek Commission concluded its relief work in May 1919. CAPS and some commissioners, including Weld, stayed throughout the summer to write the reports. Presenting final reports to the American Red Cross administration in Washington was part of the organization's concept of scientific management. In addition to describing past activities, the reports also included plans for constructive work of more permanent character. CAPS was pursuing appropriations to the American Red Cross to support a training school for nurses, child welfare stations, and orphanages for a period of 5 years. Instead, Greece received funding for 1 year only. Financial reversals had forced the American Red Cross to suspend most of its European long-term programs by June 1st, 1920. The American people not only had limited their contributions to the American Red Cross, but they were also expressing serious concerns about its plans for international expansion during peacetime. The Wilsonian internationalism and the public support for the American Red Cross, once kindred spirits, waned after Wilson lost the elections in November of 1920. From now on, the American Red Cross would only respond to emergency calls. America, after abandoning programs of international humanitarianism, went back to dollar diplomacy. It is not surprised that commercial relations between Greece and the United States increased after 1918. When in the early fall of 1922, Greece placed another emergency call to the American Red Cross, there was a robust American community already in Athens to take immediate action. The Athens American Relief Committee included Harry Hill, the manager of American Express, and W.S. Taylor, the representative of Standard Oil. The person who organized the actions of this temporary committee was none other than Bert Hodge-Hill, the director of the American School. And it was Edward Capps to whom Eleftherios Venizelos wrote in January 1923, asking for his support in the organization of refugee settlements after the departure of the American Red Cross. In 1948, 30 years after the American Red Cross had put Edward Capps to Greece in charge of the Greek Commission, a new set of US relief agencies operating under the Marshall Plan would again tap into the American school's accumulated experience. The services of 3 directors of the school, Oscar Brunier, Carl Blegan, and John Kasky, would be enlisted in one way or another by these agencies. The role of the American school as a forward base for actions related to Greece's post-war rehabilitation would be further recognized when it became a member of the newly created Council of American Voluntary Agencies in Greece in 1948. Thank you for your attention.